Welcome back, everybody, to the Aurora Show, and we are going to do Scorpio risings today. So Scorpio risings. Now, Scorpio is going to be one of those archetypes here that has an ancient ruler and a modern ruler. Okay, so I think this is the first, let me think. Yeah, this is the first archetype that we're going to run through that has a dual rulership. Now, if you remember, there, in ancient like Hellenistic astrology, they tried to make everything balanced. So at that time, the main planets that they were focused on was the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay, so Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto did not come into the picture until the 17 and 1800s, and then later in 1930, Pluto was discovered. So before that, we only operated off of those, is it 7 planets? Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Yeah, 7 planets. And so they tried to make them even, right? Where each of those planets ruled 2 signs, okay? Now, when Uranus was discovered in 1781, Neptune was in the 1850s, I think it was 1856, and Pluto 1930, they added those rulerships onto signs. So Scorpio has 2 rulers, and Aquarius has 2 rulers, and Pisces has 2 rulers. So this is the first one we're going to talk about where there are 2 archetypes really to look at. So in ancient astrology, Mars was the ruler of both Aries and Scorpio. So we can see how these archetypes could be similar, but I think they do end up operating very differently. One, because Aries is a cardinal fire sign. We're going to kind of get, it's the same thing when you look at like Venus ruling Taurus and Libra, right? Venus expresses herself very, very differently in Taurus versus Libra. Venus in Taurus is about the receiving. It's the self-worth. It's what we receive, right, in response to our self-worth. In Libra, it's more about the giving, right? The giving to relationships, the giving to the other. Mercury rules both Gemini and Virgo. Excuse me. So in Gemini, it's it's the mental body. It's more of the brain and taking in all the information and all the sides and, exploring and curiosity and asking questions and all of these things. And in Virgo, it is about the distilling down of information into what we call facts, right? Into what we call logic. We distill everything down into its most simplistic form. So that's kind of how they operate differently. Of course, Leo and Cancer are one of the few signs that don't have a shared ruler. So nobody else shares a rulership of the sun other than Leo. Nobody else shares a rulership of the moon other than Cancer. That's why the luminaries are a bit unique as well. So Scorpio's ancient ruler is Mars. And as I said, I think that Mars in Aries is very much externally focused, okay? Like I said, with all these dual rulerships, you will see how the planetary ruler does take on a different expression in the signs. And I think Mars in Aries is the most outward, external, direct expression of Mars. It is our physical energy and how it's expressed in the world. It is the art of our doing, our action, our initiative, right? It wants to accomplish things in the world. It wants to have forward movement. It wants to see things happen. That is very much the external expression of Mars. Now with Scorpio, Scorpio is a fixed water sign. So we're going to get a very different expression of the Mars archetype here. So if you're a Scorpio rising, then your archetypes is going to be Mars and a co-rulership of Pluto. Okay, and so Mars in Scorpio is going to operate very differently. With Scorpio and the Mars archetype, this is more when we look at Aries, right? And when we did Aries rising, you can see very clearly that the people who have Aries rising and they're ruled by their Mars, they're very much known for what they did, for their doing, right? For their boldness, for their actions, for maybe they were one of the first to do something, right? Aries is a lot about pioneering. Basically, wherever they put their energy as an Aries rising, it's going to be seen and it's going to be very obvious, very out there, very loud, if you will. Now, with Scorpio, what we're talking about here is the motivations behind the actions, the psychology, the emotions, the reasoning, right? The real internal motivation behind the actions in the world. And those are very different things, right? So with Mars having a rulership of Scorpio, we don't often look at Scorpio in the same way we look at Aries, right? Aries is loud and bold and fast-paced and sometimes very aggressive. Now, Scorpio can be aggressive. They are represented by the scorpion. If they're threatened, that's when you will get the stinger. Other than that, they're going to leave you alone, right? Now, I think with the co-rulership of Pluto, we get the phoenix symbolism as well, right? And so Scorpio with the Mars archetype is about what's behind the doing, what's underneath the surface, what are the psychological motivations. And with the Pluto being its modern co-ruler, we get the archetype of the phoenix. And so Scorpio energy and Scorpio archetype has taken on an interesting turn in the last 100 years, where I think before the discovery of Pluto, before we named it a co-ruler, right, the archetype of Scorpio probably expressed a little bit differently in the world. This is where I think we get a lot of the old interpretations of Scorpio, which were probably very valid, by the way. Like, there is a reason that there are stereotypes to these signs, because they have traditionally expressed themselves in very stereotypical ways that we can see the patterns of. And so when we're talking about Scorpio is the hidden realm, okay? It's fixed water. This has to do with your psyche. What makes up the psyche, right? It's the deep inner fears, traumas, wounds, triggers. Those lie in the psyche. There's also another part of the psyche, which is the beautiful part of the psyche, which is this deep inner sense of power, this deep sense of knowing, right? The fixed water, what we know deeply inside of us, viscerally, right? That is also part of the psyche. Our ability to find resilience, our ability to overcome pain, to overcome fear, right? To overcome challenges. There's a real power in that. And so with the old single rulership of Mars, what you probably would see is that people had hidden motivations for their actions. This is where we get the stereotype of Scorpio being secretive, right? Because they can be known for that, being secretive, where you don't really know. They have a hidden agenda, if you will, okay? They have a hidden agenda that nobody can really see, right? They have things that drive them internally that don't always make sense, but it's such a huge part of their psyche, right? The archetypes or the associations with Scorpio about being possessive, which can lead to things like deep jealousy, resentment, the Scorpio stinger, right, of things, what's the word? Revenge. Revenge is big with Scorpio. Betrayal is big with Scorpio, right? And again, I think this comes from its ancient ruler of Mars, having to work in the Scorpionic realm, which is the underworld, basically. Scorpio is what's underneath the surface. So, people would have hidden motivations. They would operate in secrecy, which would create things like corruption, lies, betrayals, right? A Scorpio can feel things so deeply that there is this sense of wanting to get revenge, of wanting to kind of inflict pain onto others that they feel so deeply themselves, right? Now enter Pluto in 1930, becoming the co-ruler of Scorpio. They named Pluto after the god of the underworld. So all of a sudden we have this almost very intense, very depthy energy that comes into Scorpio. And so what I feel is that Scorpio still carries some of those stereotypes. So if you're a Scorpio rising, these are shadows that you have to deal with, right? But the thing with Pluto is that Pluto forces transformation. There is no escaping it. It is like the ultimate ego death. And so all of the shadowy parts of Scorpio that were really, I think, expressive of the shadow aspects of humanity, right? Not just Scorpios as people. We're talking about the shadow, hidden, psychological aspects of humanity, right? Things that basically the darkest parts of the human experience come through Scorpio. Death, grief, loss, betrayal, revenge, pain, fear on a deep level. Like we're talking visceral fear, right? Deep wounding, abuse. Like these are things that come through Scorpio. And so because Pluto's now its co-ruler, for the last 100 years, we've been forced to transform these darker parts of the human experience, of the human psyche, right? And with that came the invention of psychiatry. Psychiatry became really big after the discovery of Pluto, right? And now fast forward to like 100 years later, we have things that are more mainstream, like psychiatry, right? Therapy, inner child healing, right? Trauma healing, ending generational curses and patterns, right? Pluto and Scorpio generation, millennials. We are kind of the last line of defense of transforming all the patterns and conditionings and programmings, right? Things like abuse, especially sexual abuse, will fall into Scorpio. Understanding psychology of things, right? Uncovering corruption. All of these things have now come about with Pluto being the co-ruler. So for my Scorpio risings, I don't feel it's not as, it's not as easy anymore to operate in the shadows as it was before the discovery of Pluto. So now the Scorpio archetype is taking on a different form. It's not only about excavating all of the darkness within yourself, owning it, healing it, facing it, making peace with it, right? But it's also about uncovering that within the world. So now the Scorpio archetype has this effect on forcing the transformation in others as well, forcing the ego death in others, forcing all of us to have to face what we have denied and suppressed and been too afraid to look at and been too uncomfortable to deal with, right? So for my Scorpio risings, your first house, right, is going to be a co-rulership here of Mars and Pluto. You are a walking trigger. And as we look through some of these celebrity examples, which all are, of course, within the last 100 years, you will see that a lot of these people, you will see the shadows in some of them, right? And where they had to face their own shadows, right? They were put onto a path where they had to face the shadows within themselves. But you will also see how these people, kind of similar to Libra, as we talked about with Libra risings, being the mirror, right? We are walking mirrors, and this is what brings us a lot of projections and a lack of self-identity. But remember that Scorpio risings have their 12th house ruled by Libra. So subconsciously, they are mirrors for others, but they don't always understand that in the same way that a Libra rising does, right? So subconsciously, they are there to not only mirror people, but with that Scorpio first house, you are a walking trigger to other people. You will be the person that pushes the buttons. You will be the person that presses on the wounds. You will be the person that brings up other people's triggers, right? And it is just in your very nature now. This is how your first house is operating. And so first house Scorpios can suffer from a few things as well. Depression, right? Because when your first house, your sense of self, your auric field is always in a death and rebirth process. People with Pluto in the first house can also experience this. You feel like you're constantly dying. Like part of yourself is always dying. There's an intensity to life that you carry. And that can be very, very challenging. It's very heavy on the soul, I think, with this. So it is just an awareness that Scorpio risings carry this heaviness and intensity. And I think one of the best ways to work with that is to embrace it. Is to embrace the resilience of Scorpio, the deep feeling of Scorpio, to recognize that by constantly diving into the wells of your own being and constantly kind of being the one who makes others uncomfortable and brings up other people's fears and brings up other people's wounds, you are in a way helping humanity to heal, but it is a really tough contract. Now, your second house of self-worth and abundance and prosperity and stability is in Sagittarius. Now, this I think could be really helpful. Okay. So a lot of your self-worth is going to come from your experiences in life. Again, everything feeds back to the first house. Okay. Everything is always going to feed back to the self. Okay. So the more life experience you gain, the more it feeds that first house of Scorpio, which gives you insight, gives you resilience, gives you empowerment, where you know you have the ability to overcome some of the toughest shit that other people would absolutely crumble under. So Sagittarius, expansion, life experiences, wisdom, right? Now, the second house of Sag is also about knowledge, right? So part of your self-worth is in gaining knowledge and wisdom in life. If you don't open yourself up to life experiences, because Scorpio feels everything so deeply, so intensely, especially because they absorb a lot from others. They basically can feel what others are feeling and not saying. They can hear what someone's thinking, but not speaking out loud, right? They can feel the grief and the heaviness or the pain or the wounds that other people are not addressing. They can sense when people are lying, when they have hidden agendas. They are probing. They are always probing into other people's aura without realizing it. And again, this is why it can become heavy. Second house of Sag, developing knowledge, developing your wisdoms, having faith in yourself is really important. The other big thing is optimism, joy, and freedom. You have to give yourself freedom in terms of, let's say, second house and sixth house often tell us like how we make money, right? What we do for work, whereas 10th house is more of a career, a mission, an overall purpose, right? That doesn't always coincide with what we do for quote unquote work, right? So second house, you need to travel. You need to get out there in the world. You are kind of a global psychologist where you are gaining wisdom and knowledge from all different people, all different cultures. You also need a sense of freedom in the way that you make money, in the way that you support yourself. You also will tend to need to have a lot of adventure and fun and joy because of the heaviness of the first house. It's very important you give yourself freedom in that second house area. You need freedom, adventure, joy, spontaneity to balance out the heaviness. Now, your third house of communication is ruled by Capricorn. You're a straight shooter. Okay? You are a straight shooter. Capricorn is dry. All right. Literally and figuratively dry. So you might have a very dry humor. I think Scorpio risings are very much known for their dark humor as well. And again, you kind of just say things as they are. You're a straightforward communicator. It also gives you a very resilient, I hate the word mind, but you know what I mean? Mind, brain. A very resilient mind. You enjoy really focusing on the things that you want to learn about, the things that you want to develop. You could also, because, you know, Capricorn tends to want to put effort in the long term towards these things, you could have found that you really wanted to invest a lot of your time in life in schooling, in developing knowledge and wisdom, right? Or maybe you make a job out of communication in some way, like being a speaker, communicating, just any form of media or communication could become your kind of lifelong role, because you're there to share things. You're there to point things out, right? Second house Sag, you have wisdom and knowledge to give, but again, it can show up in different forms. This leads to the fourth house, first angular house, right? Your home and family, your ancestry, your sense of self, your core inner sense of self is Aquarius. So your upbringing might have been very untraditional, right? Because Aquarius is typically, again, when we get to Aquarius risings, they have a dual rulership as well. The ancient ruler is Saturn, which is very traditional. And the modern ruler is Uranus, which is the fucking antithesis of tradition and wanting to do everything opposite than what has been done before. So that is why Aquariuses are there to sometimes learn tradition and operate in a traditional manner, like learn the rules of the game, if you will, so that they can break those rules, so that they can break out of it. So your home life might have been traditional. It might have been very normal and common, but as you got older, you felt this desire to break out of it. You felt this desire to kind of break the norms. Maybe you broke the family traditions. Maybe you were the black sheep. Like you took a route in life that was very opposite to your family. Your family might not really understand you, or on the flip side, you grew up in some untraditional way. Like maybe you were adopted, maybe you grew up in a really blended family, maybe your family was really quirky and odd, right? They didn't do things traditionally, and that kind of passed down to you, right? But ultimately, you have this kind of natural rebelliousness inside of you, this natural genius where you want to break the mold, and so then you might end up growing up and forming a sense of home and family that is very untraditional, that really goes against the grain. You kind of make your own rules when it comes to who you are and how you go about things in life, and your home, your family, your connections, your children. What makes you feel safe in life might be this very outside of the box kind of thing. Now, we do have Pluto in Aquarius, so for a lot of Scorpio risings, and also if you're a Libra rising, you could be having Pluto be transiting your fourth house. And this means there's a radical shift in the inner realm. So Scorpio risings are really coming into this sense of deep authenticity to themselves, and also realizing you're here to be a rebel. You're here to do something that breaks the mold. And again, because of that Pluto co-rulership, like I said, same thing for millennials, where we all have Pluto and Scorpio. We are the generational breakers. That was our task. I don't know why we signed up for that task, but that is the task. We were there to basically transform our lineage, to break all of the conditionings and programmings and heal all the traumas that had been passed down to us, etc. And because Scorpio risings, you have that archetype as well of this deep transformation, this almost like genetic healing. And having Pluto transiting your fourth house, that is probably what you're going through a lot of right now. You might be playing out a lot of family dynamics right now, or family conditionings and programmings and things like that, and really having to actively break out of those, okay? And there can be a heaviness to that. So I really feel for the Scorpio risings right now, because Pluto in the fourth house is not an easy transit. It's really, really tough. Kind of the same thing with Cancer risings, having Pluto in the eighth house right now. It's a really challenging time. But just know that this is revolutionizing your inner world to really come into the authentic part of who you are. Be the black sheep. And you know what? Celebrate that. Celebrate that you are the once in a lifetime being in your generational line who is going to break the long line of trauma, or the long line of conditioning, or the long line of whatever it is, and you are going to pave a new path, right? Now, again, there's heaviness here. So I really, feel that heaviness and can empathize, because I'm a Libra rising, but I do have Pluto has been transiting my fourth house for, I don't know, like 10 years. And it's a really heavy thing. But it will lighten up when the North Node enters Aquarius. You will feel like the sense of destiny is suddenly aligning. All the work was meaningful, right? Now this brings us to the fifth house, right? The fifth house of joy, creative expression, what lights you up in life, right? And that is going to be ruled by Pisces. So you guys are very mystical people. Part of your joy in life is helping others heal. Very much similar to my Leo risings. You are natural healers of the world. You have a deep empathy for people. You understand people intuitively, right? Pisces wants to engage in things that are beyond this realm. They want to engage in the dreaming, the feeling, the sensing, the imagination, the creative parts of life, the go with the flow. So you guys are very artistic. I would definitely say you have to have artistic outlets to let that energy flow through. It could be painting, singing, dancing, whatever it may be for you. Your artistic outlets are very, very healing for you. And again, you might find that one of your passions and joys in life is helping others as well. Helping others heal, giving in whatever way that you can. Now, one thing I will mention here is that with a Pisces fifth house, because the fifth house, like I said, is our joy and our passion. It's what lights us up. It's what, it's like I always give the example, the fifth house is like falling in love for the first time, or falling in love with someone new. There's an excitement there, right? There's a lust, there's an excitement, there's a chemistry, everything feels so alive, right? This is also the house of children. And so this is where the fourth house is the womb, that is pregnancy, but the fifth house is where we have children. And so we're engaged in this childlike wonder and this magical world that children bring, right? But with a Pisces fifth house, so there can be some confusion sometimes with children. Like maybe you don't really understand what your role is as a parent. Maybe there was confusion in like the timing of pregnancy. It could feel very fated if you had children unexpectedly, right? That's very Piscean. It's very fated. Because Pisces is loss sometimes, because it's the final zodiac sign. You could have lost children, miscarriages, separation from children, things of that nature. And again, this kind of goes into the Aquarius fourth house. You didn't grow up in this traditional sense. You're not a traditional parent. you don't have a traditional relationship with your children, there's something maybe unclear there. But the beauty is that you bring so much spiritual healing to this area. It is such a form of healing for you. What we have to watch out for is this is one of those placements, Pisces 5th house, that can get lost in love, like falling in love very, very quickly with the wrong people, missing the red flags, which Pisces often does, romanticizing a relationship initially, and coming to find out later that it's not really the best, also because of all the heaviness of the first house, right? And the heaviness of the third house with the Capricorn rulership, right? Third house is the brain. Capricorn is a pessimistic sign by nature. There's a stress and a heaviness there, so you can always be thinking about your responsibilities and what you have to do. This is where dark humor comes in because it helps lighten the load. But this can also mean that there's a lot of depressive thoughts, stressful thoughts, like the mind feels very heavy. And so sometimes that can create escapism in the 5th house where we fall victim to our joys, our happinesses start to get lost in the wrong things. Addiction, gambling, like I said, falling in love with the wrong people, romanticizing relationships or initial relationships that actually aren't good for us, alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, that can all fall under there. And it's an escapism because of the heaviness that's happening here. So you want to find healthy outlets, okay? Healthy outlets that are actually serving you, all right? 6th house of health and wellness and daily routines, and possibly sometimes that does relate to our work as well. That is going to be ruled by Aries. So again, there we have Aries energy. So this is likely where that Saturn-Neptune conjunction might have happened for you. You guys are very hard workers. You might really enjoy work that requires a lot of physical action because this is the way you process your energy, right? So in all my archetype videos, if you guys listen to the 6th houses, this is where the 12th house is the subconscious energy, right? It's what we are unconsciously absorbing. It is what lives in the subconscious. The 6th house is how we process that energy out. Okay, so that is through our daily routines, our health and wellness, our work, right? In Aries, you require a lot of physical movement. So you might find that you are naturally attracted to jobs and routines and exercises that exert a lot of physical energy, such as boxing, running. It could be physical sports, like high impact sports. You could be quite a daredevil and really enjoy things like skydiving and, anything that gives you a little bit of an adrenaline rush. But again, you might be very attracted to work that has a lot of energy to it, right? So this could be like if you manage your own business, you have to do everything yourself. That's very Aries 6th house. You could be like a sports coach. You could be a travel guide. You could be someone who takes people on tours, right? Like you could be someone who, whatever the job is, it could be like the service industry where you're just running around all day. Like you have to have regular physical exertion, okay, in order to process the energy correctly. You also want to have autonomy in your work. You work best alone. So however that looks for you, you're not going to be someone who is going to enjoy going into an office with 50 people, okay? The Scorpio first house is going to absorb everybody's emotions. They're going to feel all the things that everybody's avoiding and everyone's fucking suppressing, and it's going to make them mad. Okay, and then they're going to be the ones who have to call it out, make everybody uncomfortable, and then they get blamed. It's a whole thing. So you actually work best alone and with something and a daily routine and exercise routine that allows for high levels of energy, movement, and processing, okay? That's what's going to keep you healthy and well. That's your best way of of a routine, maybe having autonomy over your schedule, something like that, right? Now, your 7th house is where it gets interesting, right? The next angular house, your house of relationships. And this is how other people are interacting with you. And these are the kind of relationships you enjoy being in, right? And this is where open enemies, right? This is where parts of yourself are shown that you maybe couldn't see before, right? So the 7th house being ruled by Taurus. Even though sometimes you feel chaotic as fuck, right? Because Scorpio can be chaotic. There's just everything is so intense. Everything is so much, right? But ironically, people interact with you and they feel like you're very stable. You're very calm, even though there's a lot happening inside, right? So other people are seeing you through that lens. They also might be seeing you through the lens, right? Scorpio, remember, is about constant transformation. So with Scorpio, this is why it rules loss. Loss. Because with Scorpio, you can't hold on to anything. You have to be willing to let things go. You have to be willing to lose one thing to gain another thing, okay? Fixed water. The fixed part wants to hold on. This is what causes the stereotypes of Scorpio being controlling, obsessive, jealous, being possessive. And they have to learn through life to let go. They have to let go of their emotions. They have to learn to forgive. They have to learn to be okay with loss, because there's never such a thing as loss, actually. Psychologically, we have to deal with those things like death, right? We interpret death as this horrible ending when it's not, right? An ending is just another beginning, right? If we lose something in our life, we've actually gained something else, right? So Scorpio is dealing with the transformation and the psychology of these things, whereas its opposite sign of Taurus, love you Taurus, but Taurus is the same as Scorpio in many ways. They are possessive, but they are possessive of things. Things, and they can be possessive of people too. Like what's theirs is theirs, okay? And this is why their sister sign of Scorpio has to take on loss, because Taurus is all about accumulation, right? It's the accumulation of things. Now, Taurus does rule nature, so there are cycles to nature, right? We go through winter where things die, and then in spring they're born again, right? So Taurus and Scorpio do kind of both understand that there are seasons of things, but Taurus is more about accumulation. Remember, ruled by Venus. It's about receiving in Taurus. So Scorpio risings, you might find that in relationships, you kind of want to be pampered. You want to be taken care of. You want the other to constantly kind of take care of you. And because in your heart and brain, you're always taking care of so many things. Everything's so intense. This is the one area of your life that you want to just be stable, to be relaxed, to be chill. It's the one area of life you don't want to go through loss of any kind. And so relationships, if there is loss of relationships, if there's disruptions in relationships, breakups, right? It is very disrupting to the Scorpio rising, because this is the one area of life that they're like, can this just be stable? Can this one thing just not change? You know, and so it can be very harsh in relationships, right? And so, but you might find that this is where it is shown that there can be sometimes financial disputes in relationships there, because Taurus rules finances. So again, Scorpio risings can struggle to trust other people because they know what betrayal feels like on a very visceral level. They know what pain feels like. They know what loss feels like. They know what death feels like. And they don't want to experience that. And so they can become a little guarded with people. Capricorn, 3rd house. They don't share a lot with people. Capricorn's also very stoic. Like, they're not telling everybody everything, right? So there's a guardedness with Scorpio risings. And, honestly, for good reason. But, a Scorpio is actually meant to merge. Scorpio is vulnerability. It's the greatest hurdle. It's the greatest hurdle with being ruled by a Scorpio rising, to learn that to be vulnerable and then to be hurt by it is better than to be guarded. To be betrayed and to heal from it is better than to have never let anybody in. And I was thinking about this the other day, because I happen to have Pluto and Scorpio in the second house of Taurus. So I feel a lot of these themes very deeply, which is, they would always say, like, it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all, right? And we're like, yeah, right. And that is something Scorpio risings really have to deal with. And this will come out in their seventh house of relationships. There will be financial disputes. There can be a sense of, like, maybe not trusting the other financially, maybe still keeping certain things to yourself, like, this is mine and I don't want to share it type of thing. But this is also the area of life where you really seek stability and comfort. So you can kind of want to be pampered in relationships. You want to be taken care of. You want to receive from others through relationships. But the key here is that you have to open up. If that first house Scorpio is guarded, if it is lacking in vulnerability, if it doesn't trust people, you're not going to be able to receive from others in the way that you are meant to. You can receive greatly from others. A lot of abundance and prosperity can come from others. There can be this beautiful stability in relationships, but it will require opening up. It will require vulnerability, and it will require trust, right? And so that's one area. Also, Uranus has been transiting Taurus for the last 8 years. So you guys could have felt a lot of disruptions in your relationships during those times. And that could have been really hard on you. Now that hopefully will stabilize out now that Uranus is moving into Gemini, right? Here's another tough part. The 8th house here is ruled by Gemini. So the 8th house of Scorpio. This is the deep well, right? All the themes of Scorpio I mentioned. This is the 8th house. And when it's ruled by Gemini, you can spend a lot of time internally psychoanalyzing yourself and psychoanalyzing everyone and everything around you. Your mind will be your biggest enemy in the 8th house, okay? Capricorn 3rd house, pessimism, heavy thoughts, stress. Gemini 8th house, your mind can be your biggest enemy. It's going to tell you all the lies, right? We're going to be overanalyzing, psychoanalyzing, fearful thoughts, depressive thoughts, whatever it may be. What we have to unlock here, okay, in that 8th house, is that you deeply understand the psychology of others. I think psychology is one of your guys' biggest gifts. You have a good way, again, of knowing when people are lying, knowing when people aren't telling the truth. You have a way of getting to the bottom of things that makes you incredibly powerful. Now, the 8th house is power, right? Because Scorpio is pain, turning it into power. So the 8th house, your words are powerful. Use your words for good. 3rd house Capricorn, your voice is authoritative. People naturally listen to you, okay? Use your 8th house for good, right? Make sure that your mind, your brain is your ally and not your enemy. Your thoughts can manifest in the world very strongly. What you speak out into the world really can make or break other people. They can affect other people. They can heal other people. But you will be a triggerer. Again, that is your very nature. You will be able to say things to people that just pokes right at the fucking wound. But it's helping them heal. And you have to embrace that. Power in the mental body here. So like writing, journaling, speaking, sharing. These are very powerful things for you to do. And the more you share vulnerably, the more impactful it is. Now, the ninth house of wisdom and experience and expansion is ruled by Cancer. Okay, so you are a citizen of the world. Like I said, Sagittarius, second house, a lot of you need a lot of freedom. You need to move around. You need to feel like there is some adventure and joy to life. That Cancer ninth house means a lot of you might have found actually that you've traveled a lot. That Cancer is the home. Cancer is the lineage. Maybe your family, again, links to the Aquarius fourth house. Maybe you grew up in a country that you weren't from, right? Like your parents were immigrants. You went to a country you've never been, but you made a home there. You found a way to feel connected to this foreign place. Maybe you speak multiple languages. The other thing is the ninth house is seeking, right? We're seeking knowledge and wisdom. In the ninth house with Cancer, you're seeking to know where you come from. You're seeking because there's that confusion in the fourth house a bit. Something, we're not totally sure of our lineage. We're not totally sure of what's in our genetic line, or maybe it was very untraditional. And so you're seeking comfort and a sense of home in the global world. So studying other cultures, traveling, immersing yourself with different languages and with people of different cultures, you start to find that you feel home in the world. You are a citizen of the world, and you are such a lover and a caretaker. People love to bond with you. You might find that you love foods from all around the world, right? You love cooking different foods. Again, you might find you move to a foreign place and you feel really at home there. And there's a sense of, knowledge and wisdom often coming through your home life. Your greatest experiences come through family and the people that you're closestly connected to. And the 10th house of purpose, mission, right? Achievement, success. This is going to be ruled by Leo. And here's the weird irony, right? It's just, they're all ironic, is that Scorpios are very private people. They're not people that want to necessarily be around a ton of people all the time. They do need time for themselves. I think that they can be very social, but they're very private people. So with your 10th house being Leo, you have to get comfortable with being seen and being very viewed, being very visible, because Leo is loud. Leo is bright. And you actually are here to be seen, right? And I think the other thing with that Leo 10th house is to bring the optimism. Like I said, those who have this archetype, you know what it is like to deeply, deeply suffer. What loss and betrayal and depression and just death and rebirth, and you know what this all feels like. So you can bring this light to the world that is really real. It's I've been through this and I came out the other side, and I'm here to give you optimism. I'm here to light you up. I'm here to give you some joy that it will be okay. You are a very resilient person, and people look to you for that, and you can be very, very seen. And then this brings us to the 11th house, which is your house of community and friendships and your service to the whole, and where you kind of, connect with the wider social networks, and, and this is Virgo. And so again, a lot of you might find that you love to be in some type of service industry or service to others. Because Virgo loves to assist. Virgo loves to be of service, to be helpful, to be useful. So you might find that you want to bring that to others. Virgo is perfection, right? So in a way, you're also helping to perfect the collective consciousness by being that shadow triggerer, by being that walking transformation, right? Virgo is also like very detailed, brings the facts, the information. So again, you might be someone who shares with a wider community details of things, facts. Maybe you love research. Maybe you just are able to help people better themselves, right? And you might be, and you're very discerning in this area about your friendships and your connections. Again, you're not just letting everybody in. You're very discerning about who you actually connect with. And this brings us to the Libra 12th house, the subconscious. So subconsciously, you are a mirror and you're not always going to see that. Also, subconsciously, you can be a real, some of the shadows of Libra's vanity. That can be a subconscious thing here. Libra loves love. And I think maybe you guys are like secret lovers. But actually with that Taurus 7th house, you're very much lovers. I think that the shadow of Libra being codependent, people pleasing, kind of wanting to accommodate people, that's in your 12th house. So you might, again, you're a walking trigger. And so that you start to experience that in life and you're like, oh, I should tone it down. Like, in your 12th house, it might be that you subconsciously, right, are mirroring people and you're not really getting that. You're also not realizing that you actually are kind of codependent on others, that you're not developing that real first house of resilience, right? That you actually are giving your power away to others. There's imbalances in relationships. Libra also just likes things to be peaceful and harmonious. So on a subconscious level, you do really crave that. And somehow we have to find a way to integrate that 12th house with that first house, right? It is the house of spirit as well. And so I think spiritually, you love to connect with others. You do love to relate to others and have relationships. They just have to be in balance. And this can be where we can't quite see what's going on, but things are imbalanced. There's issues in relationships. There's issues with what's fair and equal, and you're not able to see it until it kind of comes to the surface, right? So some of the examples here of Scorpio risings. The first one is going to be Robin Williams. He was a 0-degree Scorpio ascendant. So really strong Scorpio rising. Again, what you'll notice about all of these examples here is that these people are private people. There's something mysterious about them. We don't know too much about them. We don't know too much about their private lives. We don't know too much about what's going on behind the scenes until suddenly it all comes out, right? It's all revealed. That was, I think, a lot with Robin Williams. Like, obviously, he was such a star, such a legend, made such an impact on the world, right? Leo 10th house. But obviously, he was dealing with a lot of things in private that nobody knew about. Right? And nobody was aware of the heaviness that he was actually holding on to. And so he was ruled by his Mars at 11 degrees Cancer in the 9th house. Mars in Cancer is an extremely caring placement. These are people that act from emotion. They put all of their energy into the things that they most love and most care about, right? And I think that Robin really did that. And in the 9th house, right, that's a global house. He was kind of seen as this like father figure, right, in Hollywood and in his movies. He did feel good movies, right? He did movies that people resonated with from the heart all over the world. Right? He was very humanitarian as well. Like, he was always doing things to help others, to care for others. Very humanitarian. And of course, the 9th house is the house of Sagittarius. So this is comedy, right? And he also had his sun in Cancer and Uranus in Cancer in that 9th house. So he was just really this like such a lovable person, someone who evoked emotion in people. Right? And really was just such a kind of open-hearted person there and brought that comedy through in that 9th house, right? Now, he was also co-ruled by his Pluto in Leo in the 10th house, right? So Leo, the performer, the actor, being seen, right? All of his power was coming from there. He was so famous, so recognized. And again, Leo has a humor to it as well. He also had his Mercury in Leo in the 10th house. He was seen. He was famous for his acting, for his comedy, for his stand-up. His words were felt deeply by people, right? He said the thing that everybody else, that was uncomfortable, but it still made people laugh, and people knew that he was speaking truth, right? Another example, Jim Carrey, an ascendant, Scorpio ascendant, 15 degrees Scorpio ascendant, which is a Gemini degree, right? He was also known for his comedy, for his words, for his acting, right? He was somebody who, really made a name for himself in the comedy arena. But there was also that heaviness, that darkness that he carried that nobody really knew until it was like years ago, where he pretty much left Hollywood and started speaking out really powerfully against Hollywood. It was after he did that movie, Jim and Andy, I think, whatever. And it basically was a movie about the Truman Show. And he became so immersed in the character of Andy that he got lost in it. And he said after that, he realized that he had no identity, like he could become anybody. And just the heaviness, I think, of all of that really weighed on him. And then he left Hollywood, right? And we didn't know that all these like things were going on. So he was ruled by his Mars and Capricorn in the 2nd house. So obviously he was a very hard worker. He became very, very successful, left a legacy, and was probably one of the highest paid actors, right? Now he was also co-ruled by his Pluto and Virgo in the 10th house. Pluto and Virgo, perfecting your craft, right? And of course, Pluto, his power was in the 10th house, in being seen, in being famous, right? Now, he also had his, because he's a 15 degree ascendant, which is a Gemini degree, he had his moon in Gemini in the 8th house. So again, the power of his words, the power of him expressing certain things and saying certain things definitely had an impact. I think we can also see where the heaviness of the 8th house and in the Gemini energy, so much was going on inside, he couldn't process it. Another good example, Jackie O. Okay, she's kind of a mysterious figure. Like, we do know stuff about Jackie O, but we mostly know about her relationship with JFK, right? And the rumor mills that was Jackie O involved with the assassination of JFK? Like, there was, she's kind of unknown. She's kind of mysterious in a way. And that's what you'll see with all of these people. They are, that Leo 10th house gives you this impression of them. They're funny, they're outgoing, they're lighthearted, they're bright, they're easily seen, right? They're kind of like very famous. They're like these icons and legends. But on the flip side, these people carry a lot of heaviness and a lot of just, there can be darkness, there can be heaviness that nobody really knows that they're dealing with, right? So she was ruled by her Mars in Virgo 10th house. I think, looking at that, she's most known for the way that she dressed. That Virgo energy was super present with her. The way she dressed, everything was perfect. The Jackie O look, the perfection, that's what she was really known for. And she also was co-ruled by her Pluto in Cancer in the 8th house. Pluto in the 8th house is an extreme association with death and loss. And in the sign of Cancer, it surrounds your family, right? She also had Venus in Gemini in the 8th house. We talked about JFK being a Libra rising. He also had a stellium in the 8th house, right? Venus, your love, your relationships. Gemini, cars. 8th house, death, right? So there's a lot going on there. I think there was a very hiddenness to what was really going on with her family. And in the 8th house, it's very hidden. So nobody really knew what they were all dealing with, right? Now, Martha Stewart's another great example. She's a 10-degree Scorpio ascendant. There is a mysterious to Martha, right? Again, like until she like went to prison, right? Like no, everyone was just like, oh, Martha Stewart, like she bakes cakes and, you know, decorates houses. And then there's kind of this other deeper side to Martha, right? I think that documentary about her was really well done. It kind of showed like she's actually a very intense person, right? And you'll see though with all these people that they have a great sense of humor. It might be a dark humor, but they do have a good sense of humor. Now she was ruled by her Mars in Aries, which fall into the 5th house. So she was bold. She pioneered an entire, right? 5th house, joy, passion, creativity, cooking, right? She pioneered this whole new era that had never happened before, where she made an entire world and legacy and business out of like teaching people recipes and how to cook and how to decorate for the holidays. She really took her passion and went full throttle with it, right? That is what she's known for. Now, she's also co-ruled here by her Pluto in Leo in the 9th house, right? She is globally famous, right? She is globally seen. She also had her Sun, Mercury, and Chiron all in the 9th house. The 9th house also rules the legal system. So I think, you know, things happened obviously with there, like her going to prison, her with all like breaking rules, right? Was very loud and very seen. She also had Venus and Virgo in the 10th house, right? She was very seen and known for this perfection that she would bring, right? Everything she did was like this perfection. She perfected the vibe, right? It was about Martha Stewart living, right? And that's what she was very seen, very known for. Last example is Bruce Jenner / Caitlyn Jenner, right? 2-degree Scorpio ascendant. Again, we didn't know a lot about Bruce or Kate, you know, Bruce, Caitlyn. We'll start with Bruce. We didn't know a lot about Bruce, right? We knew he was a famous athlete, right? Again, Leo 10th house, but he's also a 2-degree Scorpio ascendant, which is a Taurus degree. So he was known for his body. He was known for his physical activities. He was an Olympic gold medalist, right? He was very known for that. But other than that, nobody knew him. Right? So, I mean, he was famous, but we didn't know him. That's what you'll see with these Scorpio ascendants. And so, and then we saw him on the Kardashians for years, right? And so he just seemed like this chill guy who wanted to be very private. He didn't really want to be too much in the filming and in the spotlight. Again, very private people. And then all of a sudden he comes out as Caitlyn. And everyone's like, what is happening, right? There's a lot we don't know about Scorpio risings. They have an entirely private world that no one will see until it's revealed. And this is why I'm saying Scorpio risings, you have to learn to be very transparent, have to be more vulnerable, because when we're not open, when we're guarded, when we're secretive, it tends to be that then what you've hidden, what you've suppressed comes out full throttle and it will be seen by everyone. Leo 10th house, right? So he was ruled by his Mars and Virgo in the 10th house. Okay, so similar to Martha and similar to Jackie O, right? They were all seen for like perfecting their craft in some way. For Jackie O, I don't know too much more about her, but I will say that she was very known for her fashion sense. She had perfected the art of her fashion and her presentation, right? Same thing with Martha Stewart. She was ruled by her Mars in Aries, but she did have Venus and Virgo in the 10th house, right? So her aesthetic, her creativity was coming out as she knew how to bring that perfection. Same thing here, Mars and Virgo in the 10th house. He was known for perfecting his craft as an athlete, right? He was on the Wheatie boxes and health and wellness and working out and being an athlete. That is what he was known for. He perfected and mastered his craft in that way. Now, he was also co-ruled by Pluto in Leo in the 10th house as well. So again, Pluto is power. He had a very he was very, very famous, but also, as we see with this, he actually has Pluto at 18 degrees of Leo, which is known as the diabolical degree. It's actually the same that Robin Williams had. So this can also indicate that you are very famously known for how you die. I'm not predicting his death or any Caitlin's death, but I'm just saying that that is another way that that can manifest. But he was obviously very, very famous. But here, right, we have this kind of secrecy that goes on behind closed doors of things we don't really know until they become very, very public. Now, that 2-degree Scorpio ascendant, Taurus degree, if we look at his second house, right, his self-worth, his income, his abundance, his stability, he has Chiron and Sagittarius there. So there is a wound around him finding freedom in his own body. There is a wound around him finding freedom in his own self-worth, right? And in his own prosperity and abundance, right? And this is again where if you ever watch the Kardashians, like he was basically in a lot of financial trouble by the time he married Kris Jenner because he just like wasn't responsible with it. That can happen with a Sagittarius second house. You can spend too much, right? And so you do have to be careful of that. Don't overspend because then Scorpio risings, they'll look to their 7th house of Taurus and look to be financially supported by their spouse or by a relationship. And that's exactly what Bruce Jenner did, right? But that second house, you want to have freedom financially, but not be too reckless or overspend, right? So, and again, that's what you'll see with Martha Stewart, right? Sagittarius second house. I don't know that was an overspend, but basically, you know, they accused her of not paying and like all this other stuff. So those are some really interesting archetypes there and examples with Scorpio risings. And I would say that it's about really getting comfortable with who you are. Really allowing yourself to be who you are and really acknowledging that suppressing and denying and keeping things too tightly closed to the chest, not opening up, not being vulnerable, not letting things go, ends up building up, and it can become explosive to where whatever, you know, needs to be let out becomes very big and blown out of proportion because that's Leo 10th house. But overall, you guys have a really deep archetype of helping to heal the collective consciousness and being very obviously funny. I mean, every Scorpio rising in these examples, besides like Jackie O, very funny people, very humoristic, and able to, you'll notice how, right, Martha Stewart went to prison, right? She took that and ran with it, honey. Like wrote a book, became even more famous and more successful from that than even before. Like she literally turned pain into power. That is a great example of a Scorpio rising, right? What was the other example? Oh, I think with Bruce Jenner also as well, like turning his pain, his discomfort, his wound in feeling freedom and liberation in his own body and his own vessel has now turned that into power as going down this journey, right? It's everybody's unique journey of being Caitlin and finding his voice in new ways that you could tell he didn't have before, being more outspoken, sharing more about himself, sharing more about his life than he ever did before, right? So I think that that's really what you have to see, is that no matter what happens in your life and what the circumstances are, you have the ability to turn that raw potential, whether that be a challenge, pain, loss, into a great power. And that is what you are here to do, and to inspire others to do that same thing. So to inspire others to, you know, really accept themselves wholly and fully, right? And really like accept their losses and move through grief and be able to overcome it. So yeah, love to all my Scorpio risings, and I will be back soon with Sagittarius rising.